What does ethics in leadership mean to you?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's great to be here with you and cover this important topic. I think it goes without saying that the qualities of integrity and honesty are really paramount to ethical leadership. Leaders must be transparent, truthful in their actions and decisions. They must build trust and credibility with their teams and stakeholders. I think most people would agree that those are sort of foundational to ethical leadership. In my leadership journey, though, I found that it's actually empathy that serves as the foundation. And I believe really that ethical leadership begins with empathy, with understanding and valuing the perspectives and feelings of others. That involves actively listening to team members, to stakeholders, to communities, to address their needs and concerns really compassionately. And it means listening in that mode to learn, and not just listening to respond. I also think imperative to ethical leadership really is creating a psychologically safe environment. And so ethical leaders really prioritizing psychologically safe environments and cultures where individuals feel really comfortable expressing ideas and concerns. And one where failing, and maybe to be more precise, failing well, can happen without fear of retribution, where it's really seen and sometimes celebrated as a necessary part of learning and growth. That kind of culture really fosters innovation and trust and open communication. I shout out the work of Amy Edmondson at Harvard, who really leads work in this space. I also think ethics requires authenticity and a certain element of vulnerability, and that ethical leaders really are both those things and openly share their values and beliefs, even uncertainties. And that, again, goes towards this notion of building trust and encouraging others to really bring their true selves to work and fostering a more inclusive and supportive workplace. And of course, alongside all of these things comes accountability. And so taking responsibility for your actions and decisions, holding yourself and your teams accountable. And that includes owning up to mistakes. It includes learning from them. And of course, taking corrective action. We are increasingly, I think, focused necessarily so and appropriately so on equity. And so really ethical leadership, I think, is grounded in respect and equity as well, treating everyone with dignity and fairness, ensuring equal opportunities for all, valuing diverse perspectives and contributions. And it comes with a commitment to all stakeholders. And so that means being committed to the well-being of everybody, your employees, your customers, your shareholders, the broader community. Balancing short-term gains with long-term sustainability, ensuring that actions are benefiting as many as possible. And the last thing I think I've learned, and I really do think is important, and I want to contribute to this conversation, is really that I think ethical leadership also means a certain level of preparedness to be disruptive. And unfortunately, right now we're still undoing a lot of fallacies and stereotypes about leadership. We operate within many environments that have systemic inequities built into them. And so, though it's not often touted or celebrated in the context of ethics, I think that a willingness to be disruptive really is foundational. There's got to be a certain amount of upsetting the apple cart that needs to happen to bring about a paradigm shift to really a more universally accepted and equitable brand of ethical leadership.
Thanks for that. The preparedness for disruption is a really interesting topic, and I love the approach of failing well. That's incredible. Thank you. So I guess from your perspective, and given your background in the not-for-profit space, how can organizations in the broader not-for-profit space, perhaps municipalities as well, balance the need to drive growth, of course, but while considering ethical implications while they're making business decisions that include sustainability, EDI, et cetera?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the question assumes, and I think it's often assumed, that those things are at odds. And I really believe that we're really now at a place in time where sustainability and DEI considerations are fundamental to growth and future success. And I also believe that laggards, the growth at all costs mentality, those who are burying their heads in the sand from having to do the hard and necessarily disruptive work of integrating ethics and sustainability and equity into business decisions, are really going to bear the consequences of that accordingly. That time is coming, and a duck and cover or box ticking response is simply inadequate. And so what that means practically, I think, is integrating sustainability and equity into your core strategy. And so incorporating those goals as core business strategy and ensuring that your growth initiatives align with environmental and social responsibility. It means transparent decision making. And so again, a process that considers, names, holds you accountable to ethical implications of business actions, and engaging stakeholders in those conversations about the potential impacts of decisions. It means fostering diverse leadership to bring in varied perspectives to the table, which can help, again, in more balanced and inclusive decisions. And that requires also, training and awareness. And so providing those kinds of training opportunities on ethics, on sustainability in the sphere of DEI work to employees really at all levels, so that those principles are embedded into organizational culture and become, again, part of your core. And what we say here is that, into the bones of your organization. And I think all of that really comes with a commitment and necessity to really actively engage with, again, the spectrum of stakeholders, to both understand their concerns and expectations related to growth and ethics, but really to inform them as well of your approach and the corporate values that you're strategically centering.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. You talked a lot about integrating into core strategy, embedding into core strategy, I think, to the bones of the organization. All that requires buy-in from the senior leadership team, a lot of conversations at the board. So I'm wondering how AI and digital transformation are shaping ethical conversations with your board and with your senior team.
Yeah, great question. I'm really seized these days, I have to say, with the transformative and positive potential of generative AI. And the word, transformative gets thrown around a lot, but it truly is. And I think it can be a huge force for good if mobilized to enable equity. And of course, accordingly, there are massive ethical considerations we need to consider and be deliberate about in parallel. And we're just starting to really dig into those conversations as a senior executive and with our board. And top of mind is bias and fairness in AI, right? I think that's top of mind is in the sort of sphere of ethical conversations that are increasingly focused on the potential biases in AI and the algorithms. Ensuring that those systems are fair and transparent is a significant priority to this work. And for us, and I suspect for most, that means that quality of data has to be the first step. And so that includes really then applying a comprehensive equity lens to your data as well. And so we're still, as I referenced earlier, mired societally with imperfect data sets, with systems that have built-in systemic inequities. And so for us at FCM, in cities and communities, and really for anyone in any sector looking to ramp up in AI, I think starting with collecting, cleaning, curating your data is going to be critical, because it's only going to be as good and fair and conversely as fallible as the data we feed it. And it's a major exercise, but I think a necessary first step to do this well. A part of the conversations we're having about ethics and AI obviously is, of course, around data privacy and security. That kind of digital transformation brings up those concerns, and ensuring that data is handled responsibly is going to be paramount. Impact on workforce is huge, right? Including job displacement. And so how are we shifting our mindsets to how AI can enhance employee experience, to give them more time and space for the highest value and potentially new facets of their role? And correspondingly, the need to reinvest then in reskilling, right? That's a crucial ethical consideration as part of leveraging AI. And so boards and leaders really have to discuss strategies for supporting employees in that reskilling and transition of the workforce. We talked about sustainability, and I think this is, again, another business decision. And so figuring out how you're going to assess the impact of that kind of digital transformation, energy consumption, electronic waste, all of those are part of the ethical consideration. And fundamentally, it's interesting, right? It comes back to some of the core tenets we were talking about as critical to ethical leadership, accountability, and as AI systems make more and more of our decisions, ensuring accountability for those decisions then becomes essential. And so that involves establishing a framework for oversight and responsibility that you feel confident can hold your leadership to account around this. And really then finally, I'll say maybe addressing the digital divide. Certainly that's an issue, notwithstanding generative AI, and certainly one that it might be exacerbated by it. And so ensuring that this kind of digital transformation really benefits as much of society, especially underrepresented and disadvantaged groups, has to be part of the broader conversation around ethics and AI. What I'm not focusing on in the response here, given the conversation, is really the massive enabling positive potential for AI. It's worth being very excited about that. I feel very excited about it. But I'm really glad that you're raising it here within the paradigm of ethics, because I think it's a really good and necessary starting point.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. Clearly a lot of work ahead. A lot of work's been done, but there's a lot more to go. Thanks for that. You mentioned a few times talking about sort of training as it comes to this. So I guess the question would be around what about maintaining? So how can leaders ensure that they stay, they're constantly maintaining and evaluating, I guess, their ethical leadership standards?
Yeah, I think that really starts with really internalizing and understanding that you're never really complete that task or move on from it. That it's an evergreen and evolving accountability of leadership. And so what that requires, in addition to a level of humility and a commitment to it, is continuous education. Leaders should engage in ongoing education about ethical practices, emerging ethical issues, best practices in leadership. It also, I think, requires you to find the right mechanisms for you to conduct regular ethical assessments and audits. How are you going to identify areas for improvement and ensure that ethical standards are being met? I'm a big believer that things need to be measurable and transparent commitments and processes in particular. And so that both so that you're accountable to them, but also so that you can track progress and maybe perhaps even more importantly, where progress is stalled. The other part of trying to ensure your relevance and your understanding of what ethical leadership means stays central to this is feedback and feedback mechanisms. And so mechanisms to receive and address feedback from the range of stakeholders, especially about ethical concerns, is important. And we found, as well, that it's really important to be proactive about developing and regularly updating a comprehensive code of ethics that outlines expected behaviors, decision-making processes. I think often there can be the tendency to only think about that when you're in the thick of dealing with a related issue. And so getting ahead of it and being proactive, I think, is another really important accountability practice in the range of ethical leadership. And most importantly, I would say fostering diverse leadership, asking yourself, what voices are you not hearing from and how do you bring them into the fold? And then being open to being challenged by them and by differing and new perspectives. I think so much of one's leadership journey and perspective is about their circle of influence. And I'll tell you, an anecdote here. An acquaintance of mine who I have a lot of respect for once told me that they were challenged by someone who's now a mutual friend of ours to actually write down, really list the top 20 or so people in their circle of influence. So those who have your ear, your circle of trust, from advisors to your close friends that you would discuss sort of leadership issues with. And then look at that list that you've written down and assess how diverse it is. And what I mean by that is how many folks on that list are really bringing different lived experiences than your own. What perspectives are missing, and more importantly, given the outcomes you hope to deliver in your sector, what perspectives are missing from that list. And I'll tell you, it's a great exercise. It can be a humbling exercise. But if we're really going to hold ourselves, I think, to maintaining a high standard of ethical leadership, then part of our job has to be filling in those gaps, building those relationships, bringing diverse perspectives into our most important conversations as leaders. And so, ultimately, again, foundationally, the more diverse perspectives within your circle of influence and trust, the more naturally it comes to engage the evaluation and necessarily evolve the definition of your approach to ethical leadership.
That's fantastic. What an incredible exercise. I can only imagine how humbling and eye-opening it would be. I think it's something that I will certainly take away from this meeting. So thank you. Carole, thanks for your time. This has been a fantastic conversation. Clearly, this is an area of passion for you, but I really appreciate the thoughtfulness in your responses and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Michael. Appreciate your time and really the endeavor of taking this on. It's an important conversation to foster, so thank you.